He offered room by his fire this Christmas. She gave him a truth he'd carry long after she left. Elias sat by the small crackling fire in his modest shelter, staring at the shadows dancing across the walls. Outside, the wind howled like a wild animal, shaking the walls of his remote home on the frozen planet of Alara. 9. Snowstorms were common here, and few humans remained on the colony. Most had long since returned to the main hubs, leaving him alone with the harsh winds, the icy plains, and the dim glow of distant auroras. Elias liked it this way. Silence gave him focus. The hum of his generators, the warmth of the fire, and the occasional flicker of light from his instruments were enough to make him feel alive. He had built this shelter himself, stone by stone, panel by panel, surviving the harsh winters while maintaining the old human traditions he cherished. Tonight it was Christmas, and he had decorated his small living space with a few old ornaments and a tiny artificial pine. As he checked the readings on his weather monitor, a sudden spike in wind pressure caught his attention. A blizzard was moving faster than the sensors predicted. Snow swirled violently outside, and visibility dropped to near zero. He sighed. "Perfect," he muttered, rubbing his hands together. He had just enough supplies to survive a long storm, but he always worried about any traveler caught in these conditions. That worry became reality seconds later. Through the thick curtain of snow, a faint movement appeared, a figure struggling against the icy gusts, staggering through the drifts. Elias froze, his heart pounding. This part of Alara, 9 was dangerous. People or creatures did not survive alone out here. Without thinking too much, he grabbed a heavy coat, his boots crunching on the snow as he rushed outside. The cold slammed into him immediately, sharp as a blade. He squinted into the storm, trying to make out the figure. She was human-sized, but her movements were odd, almost graceful, like she was balancing herself against something beyond human strength. "Hey! Over here!" Elias shouted, his voice barely carrying against the wind. The figure paused and turned toward him. For a moment, Elias saw her face. Her eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the weak light from his shelter. It was subtle, almost like the soft gleam of moonlight on ice, but it was enough to make him pause. The stranger collapsed into the snow-mere steps from the shelter. Elias ran to her side, extending a gloved hand. "Come on, we need to get you inside." She hesitated, glancing at him with eyes that seemed too aware for someone lost in a blizzard. But she finally allowed him to pull her up, and together they stumbled toward the safety of the warm light spilling from his shelter door. Once inside, Elias quickly stripped off his coat and helped her do the same. The fire warmed them both, and steam rose from their wet clothes. The stranger's breath was steady, but she shivered lightly. Elias noticed that her uniform was unlike any human design he'd ever seen. It shimmered faintly with patterns that moved subtly across the surface. Who are you?" Elias asked, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. She looked down at her hands and then back up at him. I am Lyra," she said softly. Her voice was calm, precise, almost musical. Elias nodded slowly, still unsure what to make of her. "Lyra, all right. You're safe here. Sit by the fire, drink this," he said, offering her a warm cup of rehydrated nutrients. She took it without hesitation, her eyes scanning the room curiously. Elias studied her more closely. She seemed human, yet there was something not quite human about her. The faint glow in her eyes, the subtle hum from her suit, and the way she observed everything with a quiet, calculated attention. It was different. But Elias didn't ask too many questions. First she needed to warm up. As the snowstorm raged outside, Elias tried to make her comfortable. He moved supplies closer to the fire and pulled a small chair near her so she could sit fully in the warmth. "You're lucky I was home," he said, breaking the silence. "Out there, you wouldn't have lasted 10 minutes. These storms, they'll kill you before you even know what hit you." Lyra nodded but said nothing. Her eyes lingered on the fire, the flickering flames reflecting a strange curiosity in her gaze. Elias felt a small smile tug at his lips. Something about her reminded him of children learning to understand human life for the first time. Do you have anywhere to go?" he asked finally, trying to start a conversation. "Family, friends, a base?" She shook her head slowly. "No. I was traveling. I didn't expect this storm. Traveling in this weather? That's brave." "Or foolish," he shrugged. "Well, you're here now. Sit, rest. This is a human tradition, at least for tonight. Christmas. We make fire. We share warmth. And sometimes strangers find themselves here. Lyra tilted her head, listening carefully. Christmas? She asked. The word was foreign to her, but she repeated it softly, like tasting a new flavor. Elias chuckled. Yes, Christmas. A time when humans celebrate, well, connection. Stories, comfort. You make a fire, share food, talk, and for a moment, you forget the cold outside. He gestured to the glowing fire. Like this. She stared at the fire, captivated. There was no trace of emotion in her face, but Elias could tell she was intrigued. Humans, they survive through warmth, she said slowly, almost like she was thinking aloud. Even in the harshest conditions, they preserve it. Elias was surprised. He nodded. Yes, that's true. It's not just survival. It's hope. Connection! The things that make life worth living. For the first time since she arrived, Lyra spoke more freely. I have observed humans on other colonies. I have studied their behavior. Her voice was hesitant now, as if she wasn't used to talking about herself. Elias leaned back in his chair, giving her space. And what do you think? He asked. Do humans survive because they are strong or because they care for each other? Lyra considered this. They endure. They adapt. But they also value the small things. The fire, the comfort, the story. Elias smiled warmly. Exactly. That's why tonight, even though the world outside is frozen and empty, we make fire. We share warmth. And we connect. He gestured around the shelter. You're part of that now, Lyra. At least for tonight. She looked at him, her glowing eyes reflecting the flames. For the first time, Elias thought he saw a flicker of something. Curiosity, perhaps even understanding. Thank you, she said softly. The storm continued outside, relentless and cold, but inside, the shelter was a haven of warmth and light. Elias poured 2 small cups of nutrient tea and handed one to her. They sipped quietly, letting the silence grow comfortable. Minutes passed. Then slowly, Elias began to share his own stories. Childhood memories of Christmas on Earth, of snow falling gently on rooftops, of laughter and songs, of family dinners. Lyra listened quietly, occasionally asking questions, always precise and calm. But Elias could see the subtle signs of fascination. You never experienced this on your world? He asked. No, she replied. Our environment does not permit this kind of ritual. Elias nodded, understanding that her life had been vastly different from his. Then tonight, you'll experience it. Not fully, maybe, but enough to understand why humans cherish it. Why we endure, even in the coldest, loneliest places. Lyra's gaze remained fixed on the fire. Elias thought he saw her eyes soften almost imperceptibly. Perhaps she was beginning to understand warmth, not just as heat, but as a symbol of care, of resilience, of humanity itself. The wind outside howled louder, rattling the walls of the shelter. Snow swirled like tiny silver phantoms, threatening to bury everything in white. But inside, Elias and Lyra remained safe, sitting by the fire, sharing silence and the faint taste of tea. And in that small, fragile bubble of warmth, a bond began to form. It was quiet, tentative, yet unmistakable. 2 beings, one human, one something more, finding connection in the harshest conditions imaginable. And in the back of Elias's mind, he felt a strange sense of anticipation, as if the arrival of this mysterious stranger might bring more than just warmth to his shelter that Christmas night. The night stretched on. Outside, the storm raged without mercy. Inside, the fire crackled and popped, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Elias leaned back in his chair, listening to the faint sound of Lyra's quiet breathing. He didn't know who she truly was, or what secrets she carried. But for now, that didn't matter. Tonight they shared warmth. Tonight the cold could not touch them. And for a human like Elias, in a world as frozen and unforgiving as Alara, 9, that was enough. The storm outside had not lessened, but inside Elias's small shelter, the warmth of the fire made the world feel far away. Lyra sat on the edge of the small chair, wrapped in the blanket he had given her, her glowing eyes flickering with curiosity. Elias poured himself another cup of tea and handed her a smaller one. You know, he said, settling back in his chair, most humans wouldn't make it here alone during a storm like this. They'd give up or get lost in the snow. Lyra tilted her head. Why do humans survive? Your species is fragile, yet you endure extreme conditions without much technology compared to other colonies. Her voice was calm, measured, almost like she was analyzing him as an experiment. Elias smiled faintly. We survive because we care. Because we want to. Technology helps, yes, but it's not the reason we endure. It's love, hope, connection. Even simple things like a warm fire, a shared story, or a cup of tea. Lyra studied him quietly. Her fingers traced the rim of her cup. Fire, tea, stories, these are survival tools or emotional constructs? Both, Elias said. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. They remind us that life is worth living even when everything around us is frozen and empty. When you have warmth and company, even briefly, it keeps you going. It keeps your heart alive. Lyra looked down at her hands again. For the first time, Elias saw hesitation in her posture. I observe humans, she admitted softly. On multiple colonies. Your emotions, your resilience. It is remarkable. But I never understood the depth until now. Elias raised his eyebrows. Depth? You mean how humans feel? Yes, Lyra said, her voice almost a whisper. Not just survival, but care, connection. The willingness to risk oneself for another. Elias chuckled. That's true. Humans do that. Not always perfectly, not always successfully, but we try. Sometimes we fail. Sometimes we lose people, but we still try. That's what makes us human. The storm outside intensified, rattling the shelter walls. Snow pressed against the windows, forming jagged patterns that looked like frost-painted art. Elias leaned back inside, letting the silence stretch. Lyra's glowing eyes were fixed on the fire, watching it dance as if she were learning something new with every flicker of flame. You speak of humans, but you are not fully human, are you? Elias asked carefully. Lyra paused. Her eyes met his, steady and unflinching. I am part human and part other. I observe. I record. I understand. But I do not fully belong to either world. Elias nodded slowly. I suspected as much. Your eyes, the way you move, your voice. You are something beyond human, yet you care. You want to understand. She gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod. Yes, I want to understand. I want to learn why humans survive, why you endure, when others would perish. Elias leaned back in his chair, thinking. He realized how unusual this was. Here, in the middle of a frozen alien planet, during the harshest storm of the season, a human-alien hybrid was sitting by his fire, trying to understand him, trying to understand his species. And he felt connected. Not in a romantic way, but in a deeply human way. A bond formed through warmth, trust, and shared experience. Let me tell you a story, Elias said finally, breaking the silence. A story about my childhood on Earth. About Christmas. Lyra tilted her head, silently inviting him to continue. Elias's voice grew soft but firm. I grew up in a small town. Snow would cover everything for months. On Christmas Eve, my family would gather around the fireplace. We'd light candles, hang ornaments, and share stories about the year, about what we learned, what we lost, and what we hoped for. The fire, the warmth, it made everything feel possible. Even in the coldest nights, even when the world outside was dark and harsh, we had each other. Lyra listened intently, her glowing eyes reflecting the flickering firelight. And this made you survive? Emotionally, spiritually? Yes, Elias said. It gave me hope. It reminded me that there is always something to protect, someone to care for. That's what makes life worth living. That's why humans endure. For a moment, Lyra said nothing. Then she asked quietly, do all humans share this, or is it unique to you? Elias smiled faintly. Not all humans, no. Some forget, some choose to isolate themselves, but most seek connection. It's in our nature. Even when the world is harsh, even when everything seems hopeless, humans find a way to care. That's what separates us from the rest of the galaxy. Lyra leaned back slightly, absorbing his words. I see. That is remarkable. Your species, fragile yet strong in ways not measured by strength or technology. You endure because of emotion, because of heart.
Elias chuckled softly.
Heart. That's one word for it. Maybe hope. Maybe love. Maybe just stubbornness.
But it works.
The storm outside continued, relentless. Yet inside the shelter, a quiet bond was forming. Elias realized that Lyra, despite her otherworldly nature, was not just an observer. She was participating. She was learning not only the story of humans, but also what it meant to connect, to care, to survive emotionally. "Tell me more," Lyra said after a pause. More stories of humans. Surviving, thriving, despite hardship. Elias smiled and began recounting tales from the colony on Elara. 9. Stories of humans repairing broken generators in blizzards, rescuing lost travelers, or celebrating tiny victories with shared meals. He told of old traditions, how families and friends would gather in the cold to sing songs, share warmth, and remember those who had gone before. Lyra listened with quiet intensity, occasionally asking questions with precision that reminded Elias of a scientist observing an experiment, but this was different. She wasn't detached. She was absorbing, processing, and, in a way, feeling. Hours passed. The wind howled outside, yet neither of them noticed. The fire burned steadily, casting shadows on the walls and illuminating the small space with a warm golden glow. Elias realized he had not felt this alive in a long time. Not since the colony had first been established, not since his family had left for other worlds. Lyra shifted slightly. "Elias," she said finally, "your people, you endure, not because of your bodies, but because of your choices. You choose warmth. You choose connection. You choose to care. That is survival." Elias felt a strange sense of awe. "You understand it. That's why you're here tonight. Not just because of the storm, but because you see it. You see why humans matter, why we endure." Lyra's gaze softened, almost imperceptibly. "I see it, and I wish to understand more. This fire, these stories, they are powerful. They teach me more about humans than I could have learned through observation alone." Elias nodded. "Then tonight, you'll learn more. Not just about survival, but about humanity, about resilience, about hope, about care. That's what we preserve even on the coldest, loneliest worlds." She remained silent for a moment, then whispered, "Thank you, Elias, for sharing. For trust." He smiled. "That's what Christmas is about, Lyra. Sharing warmth, sharing stories,
Making connections.
even for strangers." Outside, the blizzard continued to rage, white winds battering the shelter walls. But inside, the world felt calm, safe, and alive. Two beings, one fully human, one part something else, sat together by the fire, sharing stories, warmth, and the quiet understanding that even in the harshest conditions, connection could survive. As the night deepened, Elias realized that Lyra's presence was changing him. He felt a renewed sense of purpose, a reaffirmation of human values he had long cherished. Perhaps this encounter was not just about her learning from him, but also him learning from her. Learning that even in a frozen, unforgiving galaxy, humanity's strength lay in heart, in warmth, and in shared stories. And as the fire burned low, casting long shadows across the walls, Elias felt a spark of hope that would last far beyond this one Christmas night, a hope that humans, no matter where they went, would endure, connect, and thrive. For tonight, they were not alone, and that was enough. The storm had finally slowed outside, but the night was still cold, and the snow-covered plains of Elara, 9 stretched endlessly beyond Elias's shelter. Inside, the fire still glowed, though it had burned lower, casting long, flickering shadows across the small space. Elias sat across from Lyra, the warmth of the blanket around her shoulders, doing little to hide the tension he sensed in her posture. For hours they had shared stories, warmth, and silence. Now a quiet unease hung in the air, unspoken but palpable. Elias could sense that she had something to say, a secret she had been holding back. He looked at her, careful not to rush her. Finally Lyra spoke, her voice soft and deliberate. "Elias, there is something I must tell you, something I have not shared with anyone before." Elias leaned forward slightly, his curiosity piqued. "Go ahead," he said gently. "You can tell me." Lyra took a deep breath. Her glowing eyes met his, steady but intense. I am not fully human. I am a human-alien hybrid. My mission is to observe humans, study your resilience, your emotions, and how you endure conditions that would destroy many other species. I was sent to understand you. Elias blinked, absorbing the weight of her words. For a moment, the fire seemed to dim, as if the revelation had shifted the energy in the room. A human-alien hybrid? He asked slowly. Sent to observe us? Lyra nodded. Yes. I have been to other colonies. I've recorded behaviors, studied reactions, and analyzed patterns. Humans are unique. You survive, you thrive, not through strength alone, but through emotion, connection, and care. You endure storms, loss, and isolation because of what you carry inside: hope, compassion, and courage. Elias felt a strange mix of awe and unease. He had suspected she was not fully human, but hearing it confirmed made him pause. And why are you here? On Alara? Why this colony? Why now? Lyra's gaze softened, almost imperceptibly. I chose this colony and tonight because I saw something remarkable, something worth observing closely. You, Elias. I noticed your actions, your willingness to help, to share warmth with strangers, to protect and endure. I wanted to see why you do this, why you care. Elias shook his head slowly. I don't understand. You chose me? Yes, she said simply. Not because of your strength, but because of your heart. Because of your ability to connect, to care, to endure. Your species survives because of traits you may not even recognize in yourselves. I wanted to understand these traits firsthand. Elias leaned back in his chair, feeling a mixture of pride and humility. It was one thing to hear theories about human resilience, but another to have an outsider, part human, part alien, see him as an example of what humanity could be. So, all this, he said, gesturing to the fire, the stories, the tea, this mattered to you? Lyra nodded. Small acts, simple warmth, sharing stories, connection. These are the things that define humanity. These are the things that allow your species to endure, when others might fail. I wanted to see them in action. Elias took a deep breath. And what happens now? After tonight? Will you leave? Go back to your observers? Lyra hesitated. I must continue my mission. I cannot stay among humans permanently. But tonight I have seen what I came to understand, and you have given me insight that I will carry far beyond this colony, far beyond this world. Elias felt a pang of sadness. He had grown used to her presence, to the quiet connection that had formed between them over the past hours. I wish you could stay, he said quietly. Lyra gave him a small, almost imperceptible smile. I wish that too, Elias, but my role is not to remain. My role is to observe, to learn, to carry the knowledge forward, and you have been part of that understanding. You have taught me more about humanity than I could have learned from any data or records. Elias looked into her glowing eyes, trying to grasp the enormity of what she was telling him. She had been sent to study humans, yet here she was, sharing her own truth with him, recognizing the qualities in him that defined the very essence of human resilience. He felt a swell of pride. Not arrogance, but a deep human pride in what his species could achieve, even in the harshest conditions. You've given me a lot to think about, Elias said finally. Not just tonight, but about humans, about ourselves. Maybe that's what survival really is, more than strength, more than technology. Maybe it's, Lyra tilted her head considering his words. Yes, heart, connection, compassion. These are not weaknesses. They are the most powerful traits humans possess. They allow you to endure, to rebuild, to thrive in ways I have rarely seen elsewhere. The fire crackled between them, filling the silence with warmth and light. Outside, the snow had begun to settle, leaving the landscape cold and quiet. But inside, Elias and Lyra were suspended in a bubble of understanding, of shared insight, and of human pride. Elias leaned back, his hands resting on his knees. I never thought that a stranger, in the middle of a storm, could teach me this much about myself, about my species. Lyra's gaze softened. And I never thought that observing one human could teach me so much about an entire species. You have shown me that survival is not just a matter of endurance, but of emotion, of choices, of care. That is something no record, no data file could ever convey. Elias felt a quiet joy in her words. It was not the joy of triumph or victory, but the quiet joy of understanding, of seeing that humanity's essence could be recognized, valued, and admired, even by someone from beyond the stars. For a long while they sat in silence, letting the fire speak for them. Elias reflected on everything he had shared, the stories, the warmth, the traditions of Christmas, the resilience of humans, and he realized something profound. It was not just Lyra who had learned tonight. He too had learned. He had seen the value of his own actions, the impact of his choices, and the quiet strength that defined his species. Finally, Lyra spoke again. Elias, I must leave soon. But I will carry this truth with me. Your actions, your warmth will be remembered, not as a record, not as data, but as a living example of humanity's strength. Elias nodded, a lump forming in his throat. I understand. And thank you for showing me that even in the coldest, loneliest places, humans can make a difference, that we endure because of what we carry inside. Lyra reached out briefly, a gesture of acknowledgement and respect. You have given me more than observation. You have given me understanding, and that is a gift I will carry, far beyond this world, far beyond this night.
Elias smiled, a warmth spreading through him that had nothing to do with the fire. Then that's enough, he said.
That's what tonight is about, sharing warmth, sharing understanding, even with strangers. The fire crackled low, and the night grew quieter. Outside, the snow-covered plains of Alara, 9 were bathed in the soft light of distant auroras, painting the frozen landscape with gentle colors. Inside, Elias and Lyra remained in their small bubble of warmth, connected not by blood or origin, but by understanding, respect, and the shared recognition of humanity's true strength. As the night deepened, Elias realized that this encounter would change him forever. He had been reminded of the values he had always held dear: connection, resilience, hope, and care. And he had seen that even someone from beyond human experience could recognize and honor these qualities. Lyra's presence, her revelation, and her understanding had left an indelible mark on him. He would carry the lessons of this night far beyond the storm, far beyond the shelter, and far beyond the frozen plains of Alara. 9. And as he watched her gaze shift toward the door, prepared for departure, Elias knew that the truth she had shared, the recognition of human resilience, heart, and connection, was a gift he would carry for the rest of his life. The fire burned low, the shadows stretched across the walls, and outside the planet slept under a blanket of snow. But inside, 2 beings had shared something rare and extraordinary, a truth about humanity that would linger long after the night ended, long after the storm had passed, and long after Lyra would leave. For Elias, this truth was not just a revelation. It was a reminder of why humans endure, why humans matter, and why, no matter how cold and distant the universe might be, the warmth of connection, the courage to care, and the power of hope would always carry humanity forward. The snowstorm had finally ended. Outside Elias's shelter, the world was silent and still, covered in a thick blanket of fresh snow. The auroras above painted the sky in soft waves of green and violet, their light reflecting off the icy plains of Alara. 9. It was a quiet, serene beauty, a stark contrast to the raging storm of the previous night. Inside, the fire still glowed, though its warmth was soft and steady now. Elias sat near it, staring at the small flames dancing in the hearth. He had spent the night with Lyra, sharing stories, warmth, and understanding. But now, he knew, her time in the shelter was coming to an end. Lyra stood near the doorway, her coat shimmering softly in the firelight. The faint glow in her eyes reflected a mixture of calm, purpose, and a hint of sadness. Elias watched her quietly, unsure how to speak, unsure if words could capture what he felt. I must leave soon, Lyra said gently. My mission continues. I cannot remain among humans permanently. Elias nodded slowly, a quiet weight settling in his chest. I understand, he said. I just wish you didn't have to go. Lyra smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried both warmth and restraint. I wish that too. But the universe is vast, and there are other places I must go, other truths I must witness. What I have learned here, and what you have shown me, I will carry with me. Elias took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. You've given me a lot too, Lyra, he said. Not just your presence, but your understanding, your words. You've shown me what humans are, in a way I sometimes forget. that even in the coldest, harshest worlds, our connection, our courage, and our hope, they endure. Lyra paused, her gaze lingering on him. Elias, you have given me more than observation. You have given me an example of what it means to care, to endure, and to choose warmth in a world that is often cold and unforgiving. That is rare. He wanted to tell her more, to make her understand that her visit had changed him, that it had reminded him of the values he had long cherished, but words failed him.
He simply nodded, letting the silence carry the weight of his gratitude.
Lyra reached into a small compartment on her coat and produced a tiny device, no larger than a human palm. It glowed faintly, its surface etched with intricate patterns. "This is for you," she said, "a token, a reminder, not of me, but of what we have shared. A reminder that humanity's strength is not in power or technology, but in heart, in warmth, in connection." Elias took it carefully, turning it over in his hands. The device felt alive, humming faintly as if it recognized his touch. "I thank you," he said softly. "I'll carry it with me." Lyra nodded. "And I will carry the memory of your kindness, your courage, and your humanity. They are lessons I will not forget." For a moment neither spoke. The fire crackled quietly between them, and the gentle hum of the device filled the small silence. Outside, the snow glimmered under the auroras, serene and unchanging. Inside, the bond between human and human-alien hybrid lingered, a quiet acknowledgement of mutual understanding and respect. Finally, Lyra spoke again. "Elias, you must continue to share warmth, to care, and to endure, not just for yourself, but for others. Humanity's strength is not in isolation. It is in connection. Remember that." Elias nodded, feeling the depth of her words settle into him. "I will," he said firmly. "I promise." Lyra gave a final nod, her expression resolute yet gentle. Then, with a quiet hum of her coat's energy fields, she stepped toward the door. Elias opened it for her, and she paused for a brief moment in the doorway, looking back at him. Her glowing eyes met his, and in that moment, Elias felt a profound sense of understanding pass between them. And then she was gone. The door closed softly behind her, leaving Elias alone in the shelter once more. The fire's warmth remained, but the space felt emptier now. Yet, he did not feel sorrow alone. He felt gratitude, pride, and a renewed sense of purpose. Lyra had shown him what humans could be, and he now carried that truth with him. He walked to the doorway and stepped outside, the snow crunching softly beneath his boots. The auroras above stretched endlessly, painting the frozen plains in waves of color. He took a deep breath of the crisp, cold air and felt alive. The planet was silent, vast, and harsh, but he felt strong, not because of technology or survival skills, but because of the knowledge he carried inside. That humanity's strength lay in heart, hope, and connection. Elias walked to a nearby ridge, looking over the snow-covered plains. The storm had left everything in pristine silence. He thought of Lyra, of her glowing eyes and soft words, of the lessons she had shared, and he realized that even though she had departed, her influence remained. He felt a renewed commitment to his colony, to the humans he shared it with, and to the traditions and values that defined their species. For a long time, Elias stood there, watching the auroras ripple across the sky. The world was cold, harsh, and unforgiving, but the warmth of shared understanding, the lessons of resilience, and the power of human connection made it feel alive. He remembered the stories they had shared by the fire, the quiet moments of trust and learning, and he knew that these memories, these truths, would stay with him forever. Returning to his shelter, Elias set the small device Lyra had given him on a shelf near the fire. Its faint glow seemed to pulse softly, like a heartbeat. He touched it gently, feeling the warmth it carried, not of energy, but of meaning. It was a reminder of what he had learned, of what humanity could endure, and of the power of small acts of care and understanding. He sat back in his chair, the firelight flickering across the walls. Outside, the cold planet of Elara. 9 was vast and empty, yet inside the shelter, Elias felt full. He had been reminded of humanity's most essential traits: courage, resilience, and the ability to connect. And he had seen that even in the presence of the unknown, even with someone who was not fully human, these traits were visible, recognizable, and admirable. Elias leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of the fire and the memory of Lyra's visit fill him. He realized that the night had not only been a gift to Lyra, her mission of observation and learning, but also to him. He had been reminded of what it meant to be human, of why his species endured, and of the quiet power that lay in heart, in trust, and in hope. As dawn approached, the sky began to brighten, the first light of a distant sun touching the snow with a soft golden hue. Elias stepped outside once more, taking in the breathtaking beauty of the frozen landscape. He felt a renewed determination, life on Ilara. 9 was harsh, but humans had a way of enduring, of thriving, and of finding light even in the darkest, coldest places. Elias returned to his shelter, preparing for the day ahead. He would continue his work, maintain the colony, and protect the small human community that remained. But now he carried more than tools and knowledge. He carried understanding, pride, and the reminder that even in isolation, humans could make a difference. The lessons of the night, the stories shared, the warmth given, and the truth revealed remained with him. Lyra had departed, but her influence lingered like a soft, steady flame. He realized that humanity's strength was not only in survival, but in connection, in shared experiences, and in the courage to care. Elias knew that he would never forget her visit, her words, or the truths she had given him. He would carry them always, not just as memories, but as guiding principles. And perhaps, in time, he would share these lessons with others, reminding them that even in the coldest, most desolate places, humans could endure, thrive, and shine. As he stood at the edge of his shelter, watching the vast frozen plains glimmer under the soft morning light, Elias felt hope bloom within him. The universe was immense and humanity was small. Yet small or not, humans had something unique, something that could not be measured in technology or strength, but in heart, in courage, and in connection. And that night, that Christmas night, Elias had learned something extraordinary, that even strangers, even beings from beyond human understanding, could recognize the enduring truth of humanity. With the fire burning low behind him and the auroras fading into morning, Elias smiled. He felt alive. He felt human. And he knew that whatever the universe might throw at him, the lessons of warmth, courage, and connection would guide him always. The storm had passed, Lyra had left, and the world continued in quiet, frozen beauty. But Elias carried with him a truth stronger than any blizzard, brighter than any aurora, and warmer than any fire, that humanity endured because it cared, and it would always carry the light forward.